Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the debut record from Asinhell, Impii Hora, out September 29th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 38 minutes in length, and they are a Danish-German death metal band. From a design point of view, this album is very old school. Actually, the album overall is very old school. But the design reminded me of Entombed. Entombed used to do albums like this, and they did it perfectly. 10 songs, 38 minutes, compact, short, to the point, allowing the experience never to overstay its welcome, making the album a lot more fluid, a lot more dynamic, having great opening songs, and then closing with a track that really puts an end to the experience. This album has all of those attributes, and this gives quality to the individual songs and to the overall experience. This is one of those records you can listen to it multiple times. It never bores you. You're always going to find something new. You're always going to find something interesting. It's an album that has a lot of great qualities in its design, and then it transports that to the soundscape that it offers. A soundscape that's very guitar-centric. This album definitely depends on the guitar sound to connect the dots and allow this album to move forward. Moving forward at different speeds with different styles of heaviness and definitely different influences. It's a death metal album at its core, where you're going to find elements of thrash metal, of black metal, and even of rock and roll throughout this entire record. Just blending those elements with death metal and allowing death metal to be the majority when it comes to the pieces of the pie. It's the biggest piece of the pie. This makes the album feel very rich. It has a lot more tools. It becomes a lot more textured at times. It gives more to the listener. It's not one-dimensional. The sound on this album is way more than that. It offers a lot more that you can pick and choose and gravitate to and discover with every single time you go through it. Now, just because the album is rich, it doesn't mean that the sound is overly worked, overly polished, overly produced. This album is none of the above. Very old school style, very grimy, raw at times, organic, you could use that word to describe it as well, but it's a rugged sounding album that allows you to feel the energy of the band. Almost like you were in a jam session or watching the band play live, and that experience is captured perfectly in the overall soundscape that this record puts forward. And it's more noticeable in the guitars because they are in the forefront. The only time the guitars break away from this paradigm is during the guitar solos. The solos on this album feel a little bit softer in terms of the touch, not softer in terms of the sound. They don't have the same rugged experience that the rest of the guitar sound puts forward. This allows them to stand out even more. It allows them to pop up. It allows them to separate themselves from the overall sound, from the overall experience that the tracks have. I think this is a great idea because it allows you to see the solos a lot better, and it puts more emphasis on them. Another great attribute of this record is the drum sound. I love the impact that it has, and in my opinion, it has two different impacts. First of all, I love how the cymbals feel a little bit further back. If you look at the layers, if you look at how the sound is put together, this album, more often than not, feels like the guitars are up front. The drums are there as well in order to create that heaviness, in order to be powerful, and then the cymbals come in and start to create a tail. Think of the drum sound as a comet. You have the head of the comet up front, and then you have that sound coming, dripping down as it becomes its tail. What this gives the record is a sense of depth. It increases the footprint of the songs, and it makes the songs more mobile. They're not just moving forward, now they have lateral movement as well. They expand and contract. The other element of the drums that's really interesting is that they don't have a one-size-fits-all approach from the first all the way to the last track. The drums are not always up front with the guitars with this tail dragging all the way to the back. Sometimes the drum sound moves somewhere in between, allowing the guitars to sit alone in the forward motion, the drum sitting a little bit behind, and then the cymbals creating that tail. Now, instead of having two different layers, you start to feel like the tracks have three different layers. This makes the song feel even bigger because this is an album that definitely has volume and it definitely has size. It just doesn't have a clean size or a clean volume. But by creating forward motion in terms of how dynamic the songs are, adding this lateral movement, adding this sense of expansion and contracting within songs and from songs to songs, definitely makes the album feel a lot better. It gives it more substance, it feels a lot richer, and like I said, it has more size, it's a lot bigger. From a vocal standpoint, the album is phenomenal. Perfect vocal performance, perfect tonality, perfect delivery for a record like this. I love how it comes across. Always delivering, very hooky. This is an album, by the way, for a death metal album, this record is super hooky. Not just in terms of the guitar melodies or the guitar riffs, but also the vocal performance. The choruses are memorable. The lyrical content works really well with the vocal delivery, and the two together work really well in the context of the tracks themselves. But I thought it was an outstanding performance, a very balanced performance from start to end, but one that hits the mark across each and every single song. When you start to connect the dots and you start to see the design, the length of the album, the amount of tracks, the soundscape, the richness of the soundscape, while still being very rugged and very raw, very unpolished, the overall old school feel that the album has, almost like it was transported in time. It's hard to look at this album and not see one of the best death metal albums of 2023. I love this death metal sound. This is my death metal sound. A sound that it's easy to digest, that it's easy to appreciate, that has hooks, that has melodies, that has movement, that has ideas. Not just being brutal for the sake of being brutal, but bringing a lot more to the table, making a much more complete experience all around, from design to sound to overall delivery. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Inner Sancticide. A blender of a track. That's the best way to describe this song. The guitars up front, the drums in the middle with that tail pushing all the way to the back. This allows the track to have a heavy experience, but also to have a sense of depth. Really important. This is something, like I said, it happens throughout the album. It's just that the size of the depth, or the extent of the depth, changes within the songs, and definitely from song to song. Moving the drums to the forefront to match the guitars, moving them into the middle, moving them back into the forefront, changing the tempos. These are all elements that the album has in order to create all sorts of kind of a dynamic movement within the track. This allows you to see very clearly where you are in the verses, in the pre-chorus, in the chorus. The guitar riffage throughout this entire song is outstanding. The chorus brings a slight dark vibe to the track. It's noticeable enough, you feel it enough, and then musically and vocally that chorus delivers that same vibe, so it stays consistent across it. Now the solo section, in my opinion, on this track emphasizes that dark underbelly that you saw in the chorus. It's not noticeable in the verses, noticeable in the chorus, at least it peaks out in the chorus, but then it becomes really well defined once the solo comes in. That is exactly when you notice how dark that underbelly really is. Next we have Wolfpack Laws. The drums up front. This track, there's not as much drum movement. The drums feel a lot more consistent staying up front, matching the guitars in heaviness and thickness and volume. The cymbals always falling back, always creating that tail, but the drums don't have that lateral movement that adds layers to the sense of depth of the track itself. It's a more meaty song, is a more meaty experience. The chorus, very hooky, both musically and vocally. Once again, a very hooky chorus. The verses are insane, very heavy, very driven, very intense, but then you feel a little bit more of a chorus that breaks away from that momentum, and at least it gives you a slight time to just catch your breath before the next verse comes in and you're pounded again. An interesting element of this track is that there is a little bit of a melancholic, somber guitar bridge that then leads into the solo. That bridge and that solo, it's really important because it changes how you perceive the song. As I was listening to the track, as it was moving along, I never really noticed that the main riff of this track had a little bit of a somber twang to it. I didn't catch it, and I didn't catch it until that bridge, and I didn't catch it until that solo, because at that time it becomes clear, it's apparent, it's in front of you, there's nothing hiding it. So then the next time you listen to this song, then you detect it better. This is the great quality that this album has. You're able to discover things as you go along, and then in the second time around that you're listening to it, the third time around, fourth time around, you're picking up these elements a lot better, and you're able to understand the songs and get more out of them as you progress. Last but definitely not least, Desert of Doom. This is an interesting song. I feel like this track could be just a rock and roll song. This could be a Volbeat song. And now, The reason why it's not, it's because it's heavier. It's because it has a lot more power. It has a lot more heaviness. It has a lot more depth into it, into its metal. But at the core of it, the essence of this song, it's really a great rock and roll riff. That's how I feel. That's how I see it. That's how it came across. But I love the combination of that pure rock and roll sound, that pure rock and roll riff, then inviting in all of these death metal elements and allowing the song to feel completely different, to feel more metal, to feel to have more volume, to be more impactful. It's a great dynamic track from that point of view, because as you're listening to this song, you know you're listening to a death metal track, but you know the bare bones of this track is just pure rock and roll, and that is the beauty of it. This is it. Asinhell, Impii Hora, out September 29th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.